We are counting down 30 buildings every American farm needed before electricity, structures that fed families, cured meat, and kept milk cold long before a single light bulb flickered on in the countryside. From the smokehouse that carried a whole hog through winter to the windmill that pumped water on nothing but the strength of the wind, each one solved a problem modern wiring later erased. Before the Rural Electrification Act of 1935, nearly 9 out of 10 American farms had no electric power, and every building on this list earned its place through pure necessity. Most have since collapsed, burned, or been bulldozed into open field. Before we begin, hit subscribe so these forgotten places do not vanish from memory too. Let us start the countdown with number 30. Number 30, the Ash House was the quiet chemistry lab of the American farm, a small, windowless shed where the family stored the wood ashes that made soap possible. All winter, children carried buckets of gray ash from the fireplace to the ash hopper inside, packing it down and pouring rainwater slowly through to leach out lye. That amber liquid, strong enough to sting a careless hand, was boiled with saved kitchen grease into the brown soap that scrubbed every floor and every shirt on the place. A store-bought bar cost pennies most families could not spare in the 1890s, so the Ash House paid for itself with every load of wash. When cheap factory soap and lye crystals reached the general store, the Ash House lost its purpose almost overnight, and today it survives only in living history museums. Number 29, the Dovecote, or Pigeon House, once stood on prosperous farms as both a food source and a mark of standing. Built as a tall, square tower, honeycombed inside with dozens of nesting holes, it sheltered pigeons that roosted, bred, and returned faithfully each night. Families harvested the plump, young squab for the table, a delicacy that cost nothing but the grain the birds scavenged. Just as valuable was the droppings, prized as one of the richest fertilizers a garden could get. A well-kept dovecote signaled a family doing well enough to feed itself luxuries. As chicken and beef became cheap and reliable, squab fell out of favor, and the pigeon towers were torn down. Today, they are among the rarest of all vanished farm buildings, standing only in a scattered handful of preserved homesteads. Number 28. The BEE House sheltered the hives that supplied a farm's only affordable sweetener before cheap cane sugar reached every crossroads store. Under a low, open-sided roof, farmers kept their straw skeps and later their wooden box hives out of the driving rain and the worst of the winter wind. Honey was money in the comb, traded at market or spooned over biscuits when nothing else in the house was sweet. And the beeswax was saved for candles, polish, and sealing jars. Losing a hive to cold was felt like the loss of a small crop. As granulated sugar dropped to a few cents a pound and commercial apiaries took over, the humble farm bee house disappeared, its gentle hum silenced across the countryside. Number 27, the sorghum mill shed housed one of the sweetest rituals of the late summer farm, the pressing of cane into thick, amber molasses. Under a simple pole roof stood the mill, a set of heavy iron rollers turned by a mule walking in slow, endless circles, crushing the juice from stalks fed in by hand. That green juice ran into a long, shallow pan over a wood fire where it was skimmed and boiled for hours until it darkened into the molasses that sweetened cornbread and coffee all winter. Sorghum making was a neighborhood event, families gathering to feed the mill and share the first warm taste straight from the pan. When refined sweeteners flooded the markets, the mills fell silent, and the sorghum sheds rotted back into the fields that once grew the cane. Number 26, The cider press house turned an orchard's windfall apples into one of the most important drinks on the early American farm. Inside sat the great screw press, where bushels of ground apple pomace were stacked in cloth-wrapped layers and squeezed until sweet juice ran in golden streams into waiting barrels. Much of that juice fermented into hard cider, safer to drink than questionable well water, and served as the everyday beverage at many a farm table. The remaining sweet cider was boiled into apple butter or vinegar, so nothing was wasted. Pressing day filled the shed with the heady smell of crushed fruit. As bottled soda and municipal water arrived and Prohibition reshaped America's drinking, the farm cider house declined and most were dismantled long ago. Number 25, the wash house spared the farm kitchen from the steam, mess, and back-breaking labor of doing laundry for a large family. In this separate building sat the great iron kettle and the wooden tubs where clothes were boiled, scrubbed on a ribbed washboard, wrung by hand, and rinsed load after load. Wash day was an all-day ordeal, usually Monday, beginning before dawn and ending with lines of laundry snapping in the wind. Lye soap from the ash house did the cleaning, and a hand-cranked wringer was a small mercy for aching arms. The heat and humidity were kept out of the living quarters on purpose. When electric washing machines and running water reached the farm after 1935, the wash house lost every reason to exist, and its kettles were sold for scrap. Number 24, the ice house let a farm hold on to winter itself, storing blocks of ice cut from frozen ponds to keep food cold through the blazing months. Sunk partly into the ground and packed thick with insulating sawdust or straw, it could preserve ice well into August if it was built right. In the depth of winter, men sawed great blocks from the pond, hauled them by sledge, and stacked them carefully inside, layering sawdust between each so they would not fuse. That ice chilled the spring house, firmed the butter, and made the rare luxury of hand-cranked ice cream possible on a hot Sunday. A well-managed ice house was the difference between fresh food and spoiled. When the electric refrigerator arrived, the ritual of the ice harvest ended, and the sunken ice houses caved in and filled with leaves. Number 23, the cheese house gave the dairy farm a way to turn a flood of summer milk into something that would keep for months. Cows gave far more milk in the warm season than a family could drink, and before refrigeration, the surplus had to be preserved or lost. Inside, milk was heated, curdled with rennet, cut, pressed in wooden hoops, and set on shelves to age in the cool, even air. A good wheel of farm cheese was both winter food and cash at the market. The building carried the sharp, tangy smell of aging curd year-round. As commercial creameries drew the milk away from the farmhouse and into the town, home cheese-making faded, and the small cheese houses were torn down and forgotten. Number 22. The potato house existed for one simple reason: to keep the year's potato crop from freezing in winter or sprouting in the warmth. Built low, often banked with earth or dug partly underground, it held bins and mounds of potatoes, along with turnips, cabbages, and other roots that had to survive until spring. Potatoes were a staple that stretched across nearly every meal, and a family might store dozens of bushels to feed themselves and their livestock through the lean months. The trick was steady, frost-free air and just enough ventilation to stop rot, a balance farmers learned by hard experience. As grocery stores made fresh produce available year-round, the dedicated potato house lost its purpose and slowly collapsed into its own earthen bank. Number 21, the loom house was where cloth itself was born on the self-sufficient farm, back when a family made much of what it wore. Inside stood the great hand loom, along with the spinning wheels, the carding combs, and the skeins of homespun wool and flax that a store-bought bolt of fabric would one day replace. Women and girls spent countless winter hours spinning fiber into thread and weaving thread into the linsey-woolsey and coarse linen that became shirts, sheets, and grain sacks. Every yard represented weeks of patient labor, and a well-woven coverlet was a source of quiet family pride passed down through generations. As cheap mill-made cloth arrived by rail and catalog, the home loom fell silent, and the loom house was among the first farm buildings to disappear entirely. Number 20. The brooder house kept newly hatched chicks alive through their fragile first weeks, warmed by a coal or kerosene stove long before a heat lamp could simply be plugged in. This small heated building held the delicate balance the chicks needed, warm enough to survive, but ventilated enough not to smother. And a farm wife checked it through the night to tend the fire and count her losses. Raising a strong flock meant eggs and meat and cash, so those early weeks mattered enormously. Managing the temperature by hand was an anxious art, and a stove that went out could wipe out a whole hatching. When electric brooders and heat lamps arrived, the hand-tended brooder house became a relic, and most were pulled down or left to lean. Number 19, the turkey house sheltered a bird that was notoriously hard to raise, especially in its vulnerable early days when a cold rain could kill an entire brood. Set apart from the chickens, it gave the flock a dry roost and protection from the foxes and hawks that threatened them constantly. Turkeys were the centerpiece of the holiday table and a valuable cash crop driven to market in great flocks in the fall, sometimes walked for miles down country roads. Raising them took real skill, and farmers who mastered it earned a good return. The gobbling of the flock announced the coming holidays across the farmyard. As large commercial turkey operations took over production entirely, the small farm turkey house lost its place, and few survive standing today. Number 18. The sheepfold protected the flock that gave a farm both wool and meat, sheltering the animals during lambing season and the harshest winter storms. Little more than a three-sided shed or a walled pen with a roof, it kept newborn lambs from freezing and gave ewes a dry place to rest, which could mean the difference between a thriving flock and a devastating loss. Wool was sheared each spring and sold or spun at home, a dependable source of income and clothing, while the mutton fed the family. Tending sheep through a February blizzard was cold, exhausting work rewarded by the cry of a healthy lamb. As American wool production declined and cheaper synthetic fibers took over, small farm flocks dwindled, and the humble sheep sheds sagged and fell across the pastures. Number 17. The implement shed, or wagon shed, was the garage of its day, sheltering the expensive tools and vehicles a farm could not afford to let rust in the weather. Under its long open front stood the wagons, the plows, the harrows, the mowers, and eventually the first horse-drawn reapers, each one a serious investment that had to last for years. Leaving such equipment out in the rain meant warped wood, rusted iron, and costly repairs, so the shed protected the family's livelihood as surely as any barn. On rainy days, it doubled as a workshop where a farmer greased axles and mended harness. As farms mechanized and equipment grew ever larger, the modest old wagon sheds became too small to be useful and were torn down for pole barns. Number 16. The blacksmith shop made the farm nearly independent of the town, a place where a skilled farmer could forge and repair the iron that held his whole operation together. At its heart stood the brick forge with its hand-cranked bellows, the anvil, and the racks of tongs and hammers, all lit by the orange glow of burning coal. Here horses were shod, plowshares sharpened, wagon tires set, and broken tools mended, saving days of travel and dollars of expense. The ring of hammer on anvil was the sound of self-reliance itself. As tractors replaced horses and factory parts replaced hand-forged ones, the farm forge went cold, and the shops were emptied of their tools and abandoned. Number 15. The woodshed was the beating heart of a farm's warmth, the place where the family's entire supply of firewood was cut, split, stacked, and kept dry for the long winter ahead. Every stove and fireplace in the house depended on it, and a full woodshed in October meant a warm house in January, while an empty one meant misery. Splitting and stacking wood was endless work, a chore that fell to fathers and sons through the fall, filling the shed floor to rafters with neat rows of seasoned oak and hickory. The woodshed also earned a fearsome reputation as the place where discipline was handed out, a memory many a farm child never forgot. When furnaces, propane, and electric heat replaced the wood stove, the woodshed emptied and quietly fell into disrepair. Number 14. The granary safeguarded the harvested grain that represented a farm's entire year of labor and its money in the bank. Built tight and raised off the ground to keep out damp and rodents, its bins held wheat, oats, rye, and barley waiting to be sold, ground into flour, or fed to the livestock through winter. Losing that grain to a leaky roof, rats, or fire could ruin a family, so the granary was built with unusual care. Farmers lined the bins tightly and set out cats and traps against the constant threat of vermin. As combines began storing grain directly and great steel bins replaced the wooden ones, the old farm granaries lost their function and were left to weather away. Number 13. The hog house sheltered the animals that put more meat on the American farm table than any other, the hogs that turned kitchen scraps and surplus corn into bacon, lard, and ham. Whether a simple sty or a longer building with individual pens, it kept the hogs and their litters out of the worst weather, which mattered most during the cold weeks of farrowing when newborn piglets could easily die. A well-fattened hog was a family's insurance, providing months of preserved meat and the rendered lard that fried and baked nearly everything they ate. Butchering day each fall filled the whole place with purpose. As pork production moved into vast confinement operations, the small Amley hog house became obsolete and most rotted quietly into the ground. Number 12. The tobacco curing barn defined the landscape of the South and the border states, a tall, narrow building designed for the slow, careful drying of the money crop. After harvest, the green leaves were hung on tier poles from floor to roof, then cured for weeks, either by the heat of tended fires or by open-air ventilation controlled through hinged wall panels. Getting the cure right was everything, since the color and quality of the leaf decided the price at the warehouse, and a barn fire could destroy a season's income in an hour. Families sat up through the nights tending the curing fires. As the tobacco economy contracted and buyouts ended the old way of farming, tens of thousands of these barns were abandoned, and they are collapsing across the countryside today. Number 11. The summer kitchen kept the killing heat of cooking out of the main house during the long, sweltering months. This separate building, often just steps from the back door, held its own stove and hearth where the family did their canning, preserving, soap-making, and heavy cooking without turning the living quarters into an oven. In an age before air conditioning, running a wood stove inside the house in July was unbearable, so the summer kitchen was a matter of simple survival. It filled each August with steam and the smell of tomatoes, beans, and fruit being put up in jars for winter. As kitchens modernized with gas ranges, electric fans, and eventually cooling, the summer kitchen lost its reason to stand apart, and most were torn down or absorbed into the main house. Number 10, the outhouse, or privy, was the most universal building on this list and the one no farm could do without in the days before indoor plumbing. This small wooden structure sat a discreet distance from the house, a plain bench over a pit, stocked with an old catalog whose pages served double duty. Crude as it was, the privy was a daily necessity for every man, woman, and child on the place, in every kind of weather, day and night. The walk out to it on a freezing January night was a misery burned into the memory of everyone who lived it. Families dug a new pit and moved the little building when the old one filled. When indoor bathrooms finally reached the farm, the outhouse was gladly abandoned, and few structures vanished with less mourning. Number 9, the well house protected the farm's most precious resource of all, its water, sheltering the well and the hand pump that supplied every drop the family and livestock drank. Built over the well shaft, it kept the water clean from leaves, dust, and animals, and shielded the pump from the freezing cold that could crack it in winter. Every bucket for cooking, drinking, washing, and watering the stock was drawn here by hand, one aching pull at a time, making the well house the busiest crossroads on the whole farm. Some well houses doubled as cool storage, lowering milk and butter down toward the water on ropes. When electric pumps and pressurized plumbing carried water straight into the house, the well house and its hand pump fell silent, and most were dismantled or left to sag over their forgotten shafts. Number 8, the milk house or dairy house was where a dairy farm's income was kept, clean, cool, and safe in the hours between the milking and the creamery. Built for cleanliness above all, often with concrete floors and whitewashed walls, it held the tanks, cans, and cooling troughs where fresh, warm milk was rapidly chilled with cold, well water or ice. Sour or dirty milk was rejected and worthless, so the milk house stood between a family and ruin twice a day, every day of the year. It was scrubbed relentlessly and carried the clean, faintly sweet smell of fresh milk and cold water. Keeping milk cold without electricity was a constant, exhausting battle. When electric bulk coolers and refrigerated trucks arrived, the old milk house became obsolete, and countless small ones were abandoned as dairies consolidated. Number 7, the hen house, or chicken coop, may have been the most quietly important building on the farm because EGGs were cash and the flock was the farm wife's own domain. This building gave the hens a place to roost safe from foxes, raccoons, and hawks, with nesting boxes where they laid the eggs that were gathered each morning and traded at the store for the goods the farm could not make itself. Egg money bought coffee, sugar, cloth, and shoes, and in hard times it was the difference between getting by and going without. The clucking of the flock and the warm, feathery smell of the coop were constants of farm life. As enormous commercial egg operations took over, the small family hen house dwindled, and most have long since fallen in. Number 6. The windmill and its pump house may be the most iconic image of the American farm before electricity. A great skeletal tower whose spinning blades pumped water up from deep underground using nothing but the wind. Standing tall against the prairie sky, the windmill drew water into storage tanks and troughs for the livestock and the household, ending the endless labor of pumping by hand. On the Great Plains, the windmill made settlement itself possible, turning arid land into ground that could sustain cattle and crops. Its rhythmic clank and whir carried across the fields, and a still windmill on a windless day meant an anxious wait. When rural electricity brought reliable electric pumps, the windmills fell still, and though a few still turn, thousands stand rusted and broken. Number 5. The corn crib solved a problem central to the Corn Belt: how to dry and store the ear corn that fed nearly every animal on the farm. Built with slatted walls that let air flow freely through the piled ears, it cured the corn slowly and kept it dry, and it was raised off the ground on stones or posts to foil the rats and mice that would otherwise feast all winter. Corn was the engine of the farm, fattening the hogs and cattle and feeding the horses that did the work, so a full crib in November meant a farm that could get through to spring. The distinctive slatted cribs dotted the landscape from Ohio to Iowa. As combines began shelling corn in the field and storing it in steel bins, the ventilated corn crib became unnecessary, and it is fast disappearing from the countryside. Number 4. The root cellar was the farm's refrigerator, pantry, and insurance policy all at once. A cool, dark, humid room dug into a hillside that kept food from freezing in winters and spoiling in summer. Its shelves and bins held the jars of canned vegetables and meats, the crocks of preserves, and the bushels of apples, potatoes, carrots, and cabbages that carried a family through the long months when nothing grew. Without it, the harvest could not be kept, and a family could genuinely face hunger before spring, so the root cellar held the difference between plenty and want. Stepping down into its cool, earthy air was like stepping into another season. As home refrigeration and freezers took over, the root cellar was abandoned, and most have caved in beneath forgotten mounds of grass. Number 3. The spring house was a small stone or timber building built directly over a cold running spring, using the earth's own chilled water to keep milk, butter, cream, and cheese fresh in the days before ice or refrigeration. Crocks and cans of dairy were set right in the cold water channel that ran across the floor, and the constant flow held the temperature low enough to slow spoilage through even the hottest summer. On a dairy farm, the spring house was indispensable, protecting the very products that fed the family and paid its bills. Its interior was dim, damp, and startlingly cool, a refuge on a blistering July afternoon. A good spring was so valuable that farms were often chosen for their water alone. When electric coolers arrived, the spring house lost its purpose, and these beautiful little stone buildings now stand empty and mossed over across the old dairy country. Number 2, the smokehouse was where a farm secured its survival through winter. The small, tight building where hams, bacon, and sausage were cured and slowly smoked into meat that would keep for a year without any refrigeration at all. After the fall hog butchering, the meat was salted, then hung from the rafters over a low, smoldering fire of hickory or oak, where days of gentle smoke preserved it and gave it the deep flavor that defined country ham. This was among the most important buildings a family owned, because the meat inside it was the difference between eating and going hungry through the cold months. The dense, sweet, smoky smell soaked into its blackened walls forever. As refrigeration and store-bought meat made home curing unnecessary, the smokehouse fell out of use, though its craft is quietly revered again today. And finally, in first place, the barn stood as the undisputed heart of every American farm, the largest and most beloved building of them all, sheltering the animals, the harvest, and the very future of the family under one great roof. Inside its towering frame lived the horses and cattle, the stored hay and grain, the wagons and harness, and the threshing floor where the year's grain was beaten free, all sheltered together against the weather that could destroy an unprotected farm. Raising a barn was the single greatest undertaking a family faced, and the barn raising itself became a legendary event. Whole communities gathering to hoist the massive timber frame in a single day of shared labor and celebration. A family's prosperity could be read in the size and condition of its barn. Though many still stand, weathered and leaning, tens of thousands of these magnificent structures have collapsed or burned, and with each one falls a piece of the country that built America. From the humble ash house that made the family's soap to the towering barn that sheltered its whole way of life, these 30 buildings tell the story of an America that had to make, grow, and preserve nearly everything for itself. They were the machinery of survival in a world without a single wire running to the farm. And when the power lines finally reached the countryside after 1935, one by one their reasons for standing disappeared. Which of these do you still remember or wish you could have seen? Tell me in the comments and subscribe so the next one finds you too.